The water of the Mediterranean is a deep, endless blue, but the harbor of Alexandria runs red with the last light of the sun. It is the 12th day of August, 30 BC. Inside the golden enclosure of her mausoleum, a woman places her hand against the cold stone. She is 40 years old, but today she feels the weight of every one of her 300 years of dynasty. She listens. She hears the tramp of Roman legionaries in the street, the sound of a world she conquered with her mind, now conquering her by force. A basket of figs sits beside her. In it, hidden beneath the leaves, is a creature no larger than a fist, but coiled tighter than the ambitions of the men who hunt her. Her name is Cleopatra VII. As she reaches for the basket, she is not just ending her life. She is severing the last thread of a tapestry woven by her ancestors, a line of mad kings, visionary builders, and ruthless survivors who ruled Egypt for 3 centuries. To understand the shadow she cast, we must first step into the light that forged them. Let us descend into the golden dust of Alexandria to meet the men who inherited the world and the family that tore it apart. The air smells of iron and dust. It is June 11th, 323 BC, in the sprawling, humid gardens of Babylon. Inside the palace of Nebuchadnezzar, the man who conquered the known world lies dying. Alexander the Great, not yet 33, feels his lungs fill with fluid, each breath a war he is finally losing. His generals, hardened men with scarred faces and cold eyes, crowd the doorway. They are not here to mourn. They are wolves, and they are already calculating the size of the carcass. Alexander had been more than a king. He was a force of nature, a comet that blazed so brightly it blinded everyone who looked at it. He had torn down the Persian Empire, marched to the edge of India, and welded 1,000 cultures into one impossible dream. And now that dream is dissolving in the hot Mesopotamian air. When his officers ask him to whom he leaves his empire, the dying king whispers 2 words, to the strongest. It is not a succession, it is a death warrant for his life's work. Among the wolves watching from the shadows is a man in his late 40s. He is not the loudest nor the most famous. His name is Ptolemy, son of Lagus. He is one of Alexander's somatophylax, his royal bodyguards. He has fought beside the king in every major battle, taking a spear in the shoulder at the siege of Gaza, shielding Alexander from Indian arrows at the Hydaspes River. He is a soldier, a pragmatist, a man who trusts the weight of a sword more than the flutter of a promise. As he watches his king die, he is not thinking about glory. He is thinking about survival. He is thinking about land. The empire does not collapse, it explodes. For 2 years, Alexander's successors, the Diadochi, circle each other, snarling over the bones of the conquest. They are a pack of lions who have just lost their leader. There is Perdiccas, the arrogant regent, Antigonus the one-eyed, a cunning old warrior, Seleucus, a man with the patience of a spider, and Ptolemy. The others fight over the heart of the empire, the rich lands of Asia Minor, the glory of Babylon. Ptolemy, however, looks south. He looks to a land shaped like a lotus flower, protected by deserts to the east and west, and watered by the most powerful river in the world. He looks to Egypt. While the others slaughter each other in Syria, Ptolemy moves. He marches his veterans, men who have followed him through mud and blood, toward the Nile Delta. There is no grand coronation. He simply arrives. The Persian satrap, a man named Cleomenes, is no match for a general of Alexander. Ptolemy absorbs the administration, greases the wheels with gold, and presents himself not as a foreign conqueror, but as a liberator. He respects the Egyptian priests, he honors their gods, and he pays for the upkeep of the ancient temples. The Egyptians, exhausted by 2 centuries of Persian rule, are willing to accept a Greek master if it means peace. But Ptolemy knows that to rule Egypt, you need more than the loyalty of its people. You need its soul. He crafts a masterstroke of political genius. In 321 BC, as the other Diadochi are still fighting over titles, Ptolemy sends an embassy to the funeral cortege of Alexander the Great. The king's body, embalmed in honey, is being transported back to the sacred tombs of Macedon. It is the ultimate symbol of legitimacy. Ptolemy intercepts the golden sarcophagus. He brings it to Egypt. He installs it first in Memphis, the ancient capital, and later in the city he will build on the Mediterranean coast. Imagine that procession, the golden casket glittering under the Egyptian sun, the priests chanting in a language Ptolemy does not yet understand, the people, Greek and Egyptian alike, falling to their knees. By possessing the body of the god-king, Ptolemy declares to the world, I am his heir. The power of Alexander lives here, in me, in Egypt. He is not just a general anymore. He is the son of the eagle. And then he builds his stage. On a narrow spit of land between the Mediterranean Sea and the marshy Lake Maerotes, Ptolemy founds a city unlike any the world has ever seen. He names it after the man who made it all possible, Alexandria. It is a Greek city grafted onto Egyptian soil. Its streets are laid out in a perfect grid, wide enough for chariots to pass. At its heart is the Soma, the magnificent mausoleum where the body of Alexander lies in state, a crystal coffin drawing pilgrims from across the world. Ptolemy commissions a lighthouse for the island of Pharos, a white tower of stone that will one day be counted among the seven wonders. And he plants the seed of a library, a place where all the knowledge of man will be collected, translated, and stored. But as the sun sets over his new city, painting the marble pillars in shades of rose and gold, Ptolemy knows a dark truth. He is building a house for his children, but the foundation is cracked. He is a Greek king, ruling an Egyptian populace, surrounded by enemies who would love to take what he has stolen. He marries, he begets children, he secures his borders. Yet in the quiet moments, when the wind whispers through the papyrus reeds, he must wonder, how long can a Greek eagle rule over the land of the crocodile? He dies a natural death in 283 BC, a feat almost more remarkable than his conquest. He passes his kingdom to his son, Ptolemy II, believing he has built a fortress for his bloodline. He was right. But he forgot that fortresses are also prisons, and that the deadliest enemies are often those who share your own blood. Ptolemy II ascends the throne in a blaze of gold. He is Philadelphus, sister-loving, a title that sounds poetic but carries a weight of iron. His father, Ptolemy I, was a soldier who built a kingdom. The son is a king who inherits a machine. Alexandria hums with the energy of a world capital. Ships from India dock beside vessels from Carthage. The quays groan under the weight of silk, spices, and ebony. The Great Library, now a living institution, sends agents across the known world, buying every scroll they can find. The motto is simple: to collect the books of all the peoples of the world. Euclid develops his geometry here. Poets like Callimachus craft verses so delicate they seem spun from light. It is the Golden Age. But inside the royal quarter, the air is thick with a different kind of perfume, the scent of ambition and fear. Ptolemy II has a brother, Argius, who whispers too loudly about his own claim to the throne. The lesson of the dynasty is taught swiftly. Argius is executed. The lesson is simple. There is no room for brothers. But if you cannot trust a brother, who can you trust? The answer for the Ptolemies is terrifying in its logic: only yourself. And the closest thing to yourself, the one person who shares your blood, your secrets, your very soul, is your sister. Ptolemy II looks to his full sister, Arsinoe II. She is a woman forged in the same fire as him. Widowed twice, exiled from her own kingdoms, she has the cunning of a fox and the ambition of a lion. She has no land, no army, but she has the one thing more valuable: the pure Ptolemaic blood. For Ptolemy II, marrying her is not just about desire, it is a political merger. It consolidates the power, keeps the wealth inside the family, and elevates them both to a divine plane. They are not just king and queen, they are the Theria Delphi, the brother gods. The marriage shocks the Greek world, where incest is taboo. But in Egypt, the land of Isis and Osiris, brother and sister who loved and created life, it is understood. The Egyptians see their pharaoh not as a man, but as a living god, and gods do not play by mortal rules. Ptolemy and Arsinoe embrace this duality. They are depicted on temple walls in the traditional Egyptian style, offering sacrifices to the old gods. Yet in their palace, they speak Greek, wear Greek clothes, and debate philosophy with Greek scholars. Imagine the great procession Ptolemy II throws in Alexandria. It is a parade of such staggering opulence that people write about it for centuries. Golden statues of Alexander and Ptolemy I roll through the streets on massive wagons. Cages of exotic animals, elephants, panthers, giraffes, roar and screech, a living map of the Ptolemaic sphere of influence. Men carry enormous mixing bowls of solid gold, filled with precious spices that perfume the air for miles. At the heart of it all, seated on a golden throne, are the brother gods themselves. They are beautiful, serene, untouchable. They wave to the crowd, but their eyes are cold, calculating. They are looking for dissent. They are looking for threats. Under the surface of this golden perfection, the rot begins. To keep the bloodline pure, the Ptolemies must keep breeding within the family. But blood, when it does not mix with fresh streams, grows stagnant. The genetic dice are loaded. Future generations will pay for this golden age with madness, obesity, and weakness. But for now, Ptolemy II is successful. He fights off his rivals, expands his navy, and makes Alexandria the center of the Mediterranean world. Yet even in his triumph, the paranoia is infectious. He watches his own son, Ptolemy II, with suspicion. The boy is popular, a natural leader. In the Ptolemaic house, popularity is a death sentence. The whispers start. Plots are woven in the shadows of the library's stacks. By the end of his life, Ptolemy II has his own son, his flesh and blood, executed for treason. The love of power has consumed the love of family. When Ptolemy II finally dies, old and full of years, he leaves behind a kingdom richer and more powerful than he found it. But he also leaves behind a tradition. He has taught his descendants two things. First, that to rule is to be a god. Second, that to be a god is to be utterly alone. The stage is set. The next generations will not be builders. They will be players in a tragedy, trapped in a golden cage of their own making, sharpening their knives for the moment the music stops. The library may contain all the wisdom of the world, but it holds no scroll that can cure the poison flowing in the Ptolemaic blood. The gold does not tarnish, but the hands that hold it begin to shake. Ptolemy III, the third king of the dynasty, is the last great builder. He pushes the empire to its greatest extent, his armies marching as far as the borders of Bactria. He adds to the library, mandates that every ship docking in Alexandria surrender its scrolls for copying, and covers Egypt in monuments. But when he dies, the mask slips. The madness that has been brewing in the blood for 3 generations begins to bubble to the surface. His son, Ptolemy IV, is a child who inherits a world of wonders and treats it like a toy. He is Philopator, father-loving, a cruel irony, for he may very well have murdered his own parents to take the throne. He is weak-chinned, easily led, and utterly obsessed with the theater. While the armies of the Seleucid Empire mass on Egypt's northern border, preparing to crush the dynasty forever, Ptolemy IV stays in his palace, writing plays and acting in them, draping himself in silk, and pretending the world outside does not exist. He leaves the business of survival to his ministers, Sozobius and Agathocles, men who are predators dressed as courtiers. In 217 BC, the Seleucid army under Antiochus III marches south. They are veterans, hardened by years of warfare, their silver shields gleaming like a river of metal. Egypt is unprepared, its army a shadow of the force that conquered with Alexander. Sozobius does the only thing he can. He scrapes the bottom of the barrel. He drafts Egyptians, tens of thousands of them, and trains them in the Macedonian phalanx formation. For the first time, the native people of the Nile are armed and trained to fight as Greeks. It is a necessary heresy, and it will have consequences no one can yet foresee. Ptolemy IV is dragged from his theater, placed at the head of this army, and marched to Raphia, a dusty town near the borders of Gaza. The two armies meet on a plain of hard-baked earth, the sun a white-hot hammer in the sky. The elephants charge first, Indian beasts for the Seleucids, African forest elephants for the Ptolemies, smaller but fierce. The air fills with trumpeting and the crunch of bone. Then the phalanxes meet, a forest of pikes thrusting and stabbing, men screaming in Greek and Egyptian. Against all odds, the Egyptians hold. They break the Seleucid line. Ptolemy IV, who wanted only to be an actor, finds himself a victor. He stands in his chariot, sweat and dust caking his face as the enemy retreats. He has saved the dynasty. He has proved that Egypt, even under a weak king, can survive. But he does not return to Alexandria to celebrate with his people. He returns to his palace, to his plays, to his isolation. He thanks his ministers, the men who truly won the war, and then he forgets them. And the ministers, Sozobius and Agathocles, do not forget. They remember the power they tasted, and they want more. The rot accelerates. Ptolemy IV dies young, probably poisoned by his own courtiers, or simply worn out by his own excesses. He leaves the throne to a child, his 5-year-old son, Ptolemy V, and with a child on the throne, the wolves come out of the shadows. Sozobius and Agathocles do not bother to hide their ambition. They rule in the boy's name, but they rule for themselves. The empire so recently saved at Raphia begins to crumble. Distant provinces rebel. The native Egyptians, armed and trained for Raphia, remember that they know how to fight. They rise up in the south, forming their own rebel dynasties. Upper Egypt is lost. The Ptolemies control only the coast, the cities, the thin ribbon of the delta. The low point comes with a murder so cold it chills the stone of the palace. Agathocles, fearing the boy king's mother, Queen Arsinoe III, will seize power, has her dragged from her chambers. She is a Ptolemy, a daughter of incest and gold, but in that moment she is just a woman running for her life. She hides in a small room, clinging to her mother's statue for protection. They find her. They cut her down. The boy king, Ptolemy IV, is forced to watch. He is 6 years old. He learns the lesson of the dynasty etched in blood: trust no one. He grows up surrounded by killers, and he learns to become one himself. When he finally takes power, he is a tyrant forged in trauma. He is the king who commissions the Rosetta Stone, the black slab of granodiorite that will one day unlock the secrets of Egypt. But the decree on that stone is not one of peace. It is a celebration of victory over the Egyptians. It praises the king for crushing the native rebellion, for butchering the rebels, for restoring the order of the Greek masters. The stone is a monument to division, to the widening chasm between the Ptolemaic house and the land they rule. The dynasty is still standing, but it is standing on a fault line. The earth is beginning to tremble. As Ptolemy IV lies dying, poisoned by his own courtiers at the age of 30, a new star is rising in the west. It is not a comet of conquest, but the cold, steady light of a republic. Rome. The Ptolemies, trapped in their golden cage, do not see it. They are too busy killing each other. But the shadow is lengthening, and it will soon cover the sun. The next chapter will belong not to the Greeks, but to the Romans, and to a king so strange, so decadent, that he will sell his own kingdom for a tune on his flute. The world has tilted. The axis of power no longer runs through Babylon or Alexandria. It runs through the Forum in Rome, a city of brick and blood that is rapidly turning to marble. The Roman Republic, lean and hungry, has crushed Carthage, humbled the Greek kingdoms, and now sits at the table of the Mediterranean like a guest who has eaten everything in sight and is eyeing the host's plate. Egypt is that plate, the richest, softest, most tempting morsel left. Ptolemy XII sits on the throne of Alexandria, and he knows he is a target. He is a bastard, born of a concubine, not the pure Ptolemaic blood. His claim is weak, his treasury is drained, and his people despise him. He is everything a king should not be: weak-willed, pleasure-seeking, and obsessed with music. His courtiers whisper a nickname behind his back: Orleats, the flute-player. It is an insult they would never dare speak to his face, but it sticks, a stain on the dignity of the pharaoh. Orleats knows he cannot survive without friends, but his friends are not in Egypt. They are in Rome. The Roman Senate is the new power, and if you want a throne, you must buy it from them. Orleats empties his treasury. He sends shiploads of gold, silver, and Egyptian grain to the Roman senators, bribing them for a single piece of paper, a decree declaring him a friend and ally of the Roman people. It is a title, nothing more, a scrap of parchment, but for Orleats it is a shield. As long as Rome calls him a friend, no Roman general can legally take his kingdom. But the Romans are not satisfied with bribes. They want more. They want Egypt itself. In 59 BC, Orleats makes a deal with the most powerful man in Rome, Julius Caesar. The price is astronomical. Orleats agrees to pay Caesar and his ally Pompey the Great 6,000 talents, more money than most kingdoms see in a decade. It is a bribe so large it mortgages the entire Egyptian economy. To pay it, Orleats must tax his people into starvation. He must borrow from Roman bankers at usurious rates. He is no longer a king. He is a debt slave in a golden collar. The Egyptians, already starving, already humiliated by their foreign king, finally snap. In 58 BC, while Orleats is in Rome groveling for more support, the people of Alexandria rise up. They storm the palace. They chase out the Greek officials. They place Orleats's own daughter, the fiery and ambitious Berenice IV, on the throne. It is a revolution. For a brief moment, it seems the Ptolemaic nightmare might end, that Egypt might rule itself. Orleats, hearing the news in a Roman villa, does not fight. He does not sail home to reclaim his throne. He hides. He goes to Ephesus, to the temple of Artemis, and he waits. He waits for the Romans to solve his problem for him. And they do. The Romans do not want a popular Egyptian queen ruling without their permission. They want the debt to be paid. They send an army, not a massive invasion, but a small force under a Syrian governor named Gabinius. In 55 BC, Gabinius marches into Egypt, crushes the army of Berenice, and restores Orleats to his throne. Berenice, his own daughter, is executed. Her head is delivered to her father on a platter. Imagine that moment. Orleats, the flute player, standing in the palace courtyard, looking at the face of his dead child. Is there grief? Is there relief? We cannot know, but we can see the lesson it teaches his other children. Standing in the shadows, watching this horror, is a young girl. She is about 14 years old. Her name is Cleopatra. She watches her father murder her sister to keep a throne that is already crumbling. She watches the Roman soldiers lounging in the palace, their eyes on the gold, their hands on their swords. She learns that family is a weapon and Rome is a disease. You cannot fight Rome. You must charm it. You must seduce it. You must make it love you, or it will destroy you. Orleans does not last long after his return. He is old, worn out by fear and excess. He dies of illness in 51 BC, a natural death, a rarity for his family. But in his will he does something strange. He names his heirs, his eldest surviving daughter, Cleopatra VII, and her younger brother, Ptolemy XII. They are to rule together, and they are to marry, as the gods demand. But Orleans also does one more thing. He sends a copy of his will to the Roman Senate. He places Egypt under Rome's protection. He makes them the guarantor of his children's throne. He has sold his kingdom's future to pay for his present. The stage is now set for the final act. The players are young, brilliant, and deadly, and the audience is Rome. The children are alone with the crown. Cleopatra is 18, a woman forged in the fire of her father's failures. She is not the conventional beauty of legend. Her coins show a sharp nose, a determined chin, a face of intelligence rather than softness. But she possesses something far more dangerous than beauty, a mind. She is the first Ptolemy in 300 years to actually learn the Egyptian language. She speaks 9 languages total. She studies rhetoric, philosophy, astronomy. She watches the Roman officers in the palace and learns their weaknesses. Her brother, Ptolemy XII, is 10 years old. He is a child with the temper of a god and the advisors of a snake. The first years are a cold war. Cleopatra rules, but she rules alone. She tries to assert her authority to push her little brother aside. But the boy has a guardian, a eunuch named Pothinus, who is as ambitious as he is cruel. Pothinus whispers in the boy's ear. He tells him that his sister is a usurper, that she plans to kill him, that the throne belongs to him alone. The palace divides. The city of Alexandria holds its breath. In 48 BC, the tension breaks. Pothinus stages a coup. Cleopatra is driven from the palace, from the city, from Egypt. She flees into the desert, a queen without a country. She is not defeated. She raises an army in Syria, among the Arab tribes and the remnants of Ptolemaic loyalists. She marches back toward Egypt, toward the frontier fortress of Pelusium. Her brother's army meets her there. For months, they stare at each other across the sand, 2 armies, brother and sister, waiting for the other to blink. The dynasty has collapsed into civil war. Egypt is bleeding itself white. And then a storm. A Roman fleet appears off the coast of Alexandria, battered by rough seas. From one of the ships steps a man in his 50s, his hair thinning, his toga purple with imperium. It is Gnaeus Pompeius Magnus, Pompey the Great. He is fleeing another civil war, the one raging in Rome between himself and his former ally Julius Caesar. He comes to Egypt seeking refuge, expecting the gratitude of a king whose father he helped restore. He is a fool. Pothinus and the boy king Ptolemy XII see an opportunity. Caesar is coming. He is pursuing Pompey. If they can prove their loyalty to the victor, they can secure Rome's support against Cleopatra. They invite Pompey ashore. He is rowed toward the beach in a small boat, his wife watching from the ship. As he rises to step onto the sand, a Roman soldier who has switched sides, a man named Septimius, stabs him in the back. Then another. Then another. Pompey the Great, conqueror of the East, dies on an Egyptian beach, his body left to rot in the sun. His head is cut off, pickled, and saved as a gift for Julius Caesar. 3 days later, Caesar arrives. He is shown the head. He does not thank the Egyptians. He weeps. He weeps for his enemy, for the greatness of Rome reduced to butchery, for the horror of what he is about to walk into. He marches into Alexandria and takes possession of the palace. He is the consul of Rome, and he demands the debts owed to him by the Ptolemaic house. He demands that the warring siblings appear before him and submit to his arbitration. Ptolemy XII arrives with his army, his advisors, his confidants. Cleopatra cannot. She is outside the city, her army blockaded, her brother's forces watching every road. If she tries to enter Alexandria, she will be killed. But she is a Ptolemy. She will not be stopped by a wall. In the darkness of the night, a small boat slips across the harbor of Alexandria. With her is one loyal companion, Apollodorus the Sicilian. They land near the palace. They cannot walk through the front gates. So they find another way. Apollodorus ties Cleopatra into a linen sack, a bag large enough to hold a bedroll. He slings it over his shoulder and carries her through the palace corridors, past the guards, past the servants, past everyone. He sets the sack down in Caesar's private quarters. The Roman dictator, a man who has seen everything, who has conquered Gaul and defeated his enemies, watches as the bag is untied. And out steps a woman. She is 21 years old. She is not just beautiful, she is electric. She speaks to him in Greek, in his own language. She argues her case with the logic of a philosopher and the fire of a queen. She offers him Egypt not as a conquest, but as an ally. She offers him gold. She offers him grain, and she offers herself. By dawn, Cleopatra has done what her father could not. She has seduced Rome. She and Caesar become lovers. She becomes his ally. And her brother, Ptolemy XII, becomes an enemy. The war that follows is the death rattle of the dynasty. The Alexandrian War is fought in the streets and harbors of the city. The great library, the brain of the ancient world, catches fire. Scholars weep as scrolls curl and blacken. Caesar fights for his life. Ptolemy XII, the boy king, drowns in the Nile trying to flee the battle. Cleopatra is left alone. She marries her other, even younger brother, Ptolemy XIV, a child of 12. She rules as queen, but she rules with a Roman shadow beside her. She travels to Rome, living as Caesar's mistress, parading their son, Caesarion, little Caesar, through the streets. She dreams of a new dynasty, a fusion of Rome and Egypt, a world empire ruled by her blood. But the dream dies in the Senate house on the Ides of March, 44 BC, when the knives find Caesar. Cleopatra flees Rome, returns to Egypt and waits. She knows the storm is coming. It comes in the form of Mark Antony, the last of Caesar's generals, a man of passion and violence. She meets him at Tarsus, sailing into the harbor on a golden barge with purple sails, dressed as Aphrodite. She seduces him as she seduced Caesar. They fall in love. They have children. They rule the East together. They dream of a world where Alexandria, not Rome, is the capital. But Octavian, Caesar's cold, calculating heir, waits. He is not a man of passion, he is a man of steel. He turns Rome against Antony, against the foreign queen. He declares war not on Antony, but on Cleopatra, on Egypt. In 31 BC, off the coast of Actium, the fate of the world is decided. The battle is chaos, a melee of fire and oars. Cleopatra flees with her ships. Antony follows. They are beaten. A year later, Octavian is at the gates of Alexandria. The last act unfolds in a mausoleum. Cleopatra locks herself inside with her treasure. Antony, hearing a false rumor of her death, falls on his sword. He is brought to her, dying in her arms. She mourns him, but she has no time. Octavian wants her alive, wants to drag her through the streets of Rome in chains. She will not allow it. On August 12, 30 BC, she dresses in her finest robes, the robes of a goddess. She takes a meal. A basket of figs is delivered. Inside, hidden beneath the leaves, is an asp, a sacred serpent of Egyptian royalty. She reaches in. She lets it bite her. She dies not as a captive, but as a queen. But the dynasty does not end with her. It ends with her son. Caesarion, 17 years old, the last pharaoh, the son of Cleopatra and Julius Caesar, is sent south, toward the Red Sea, toward India, toward escape. Octavian sends soldiers after him. They catch him. They promise him safety. They lie. The boy is dragged from the sanctuary of a temple and executed. The line of Ptolemy, son of Lagus, the line that began with a general stealing the body of a god, ends with a boy crying in the dust. When Octavian enters Alexandria, he walks through the hippodrome. He does not loot the city. He respects the memory of Alexander. But he walks through the palaces, past the golden thrones, past the empty mausoleum where the last queen lies dead. He gives orders. The kingdom of the Ptolemies is no more. It is now a Roman province. The grain of Egypt will now feed Rome. The gold of Egypt will now fill Roman coffers. The dynasty is over. The eagle has fallen. But as the sun sets over the Mediterranean, painting the same harbor red that Ptolemy I saw 3 centuries before, something lingers. It is not just the memory of Cleopatra's beauty, or the madness of her uncles, or the ambition of her grandfathers. It is the echo of a question. For 300 years, this family ruled one of the oldest civilizations on Earth. They built the Lighthouse, the library, the dream of Alexandria. They were gods, and they were monsters, and they were human. They fought, they loved, they killed, they died. And in the end, when the Roman took the throne and the snake lay coiled in the fig basket, what was left? A story, a warning, a beautiful, terrible dream of power, told in gold and blood, now scattered like dust on the Egyptian wind.